In this lesson, you will learn how to use the fdisk utility to create GPT and MBR partition tables. If you're unsure what disks are available, run fdisk-l to display a list of devices. This particular server has 3 disks. The first disk listed here, dev-sdb, does not contain any partition information, so it hasn't been partitioned. You can see that this disk, dev-sda, has 2 partitions, dev-sda1 and dev-sda2. The third disk, like dev-sdb, dev-sdc does not have a partition table. Let's work with dev-sdb. Let's ask fdisk for some help by typing in M and hitting enter. Let's create a new MBR partition table. We will create 3 primary partitions. The first one will be a 1 GB swap partition. The second will be a 20 GB partition. And the third and final partition will use the remaining space on the disk. To create a new MBR partition, just type in and hit enter. It's going to guide us through a series of questions here, and we'll just answer them along the way. We're going to create a primary partition, so you can either hit P and hit enter, or the default answer is P, so you can just hit enter. This is our first partition on this disk, so we'll just hit enter to create partition number 1. And then we'll start at the default. And then here we're going to enter +1G for 1 GB in size. You can see that it says partition 1 of type Linux and of size 1 GB is set. So the default partition type created by fdisk is Linux, and it's represented by the number 83. To change the partition type, we can type in T. And to get a list of partitions, we'll type in L. And then we'll see that partition 83, or the type 83 is Linux, but we want this to be a swap partition. So 82 represents Linux swap. So we'll enter in 82 here. Let's continue on with the next partition. N for a new partition. This is going to be a primary partition. And the default is 2, so this is our second partition. We'll accept that. We'll accept the defaults again. We wanted a 20 GB partition, so we'll do +20G. And then finally, we want the third partition. We'll just do another one here with N. Primary again, 3. And this will set it to the very end of the disk if we accept the default. So we want the remaining space in this third partition, so I'm just going to hit enter. To view the current partition table, we'll just use P. We'll just make sure we have everything set the way we want to. And you can see that dev-sdb1, our first primary partition, is of type 82 Linux swap, and then our other 2 partitions are Linux. So we'll go ahead and accept this, and we'll write this to disk with the W command. Let's create a GPT partition table with fdisk. We'll do this on dev-sdc. Just P to print to show you that there is no partition table currently assigned here. And to create a GPT partition table, we'll just do G. And then to create a new partition, we will type in the letter N for new. And you can see there the partition number ranges from 1 to 128. And we're going to just create 1. And we're going to accept the defaults here. Just use the first available sector and the last sector here. We're just going to use 1 big partition, and we'll print, and then you can see that we have 1 Linux partition that takes up the entire disk. Go ahead and write that with W, and we should be done. Now if we look back at our fdisk-l command, we should see all these partitions that we've just created. dev-sdb has the 3 partitions we created. dev-sda is unmodified. It still has the 2 partitions it had when we started. And dev-sdc here has our 1 big partition.